Everyone treats summer like it owes you happiness. Long days, pool parties, your best life on a loop. So what does it mean when you feel worse? The summer blues are real. It's why summer is one of the busiest stretches of the year for people starting therapy. Therapy is not only for when you're in crisis. Grow therapy is for all the moments when you decide you want more. More support, more clarity, more tools. Mental health isn't a destination you reach. It's something you build, and Grow makes that easier. Grow connects you with thousands of high-quality licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. The therapist you want takes your insurance on Grow. Grow accepts over 125 insurance plans. Sessions average $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/book now today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/book now. growtherapy.com/book now. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Criminology is a true crime podcast that may contain discussion about violent or disturbing topics. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 421 of the Criminology podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson.
And this is Mike Morford.
Mr. Morford, how you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty good. Watching some preseason football, going to football practices. My daughter's doing volleyball and soccer, so I'm keeping busy with sports mostly. What have you been up to?
Oh, man, you do sound busy. I was recording with Gibby the other night and just telling him, I've just been hooked on YouTube, man. I stumbled across this guy. He's a young guy, but his name's like Max the Meat Guy on YouTube. He just does a lot of cooking, and I can't stop watching the videos. I'm like entranced. I don't even know if that's a word.
Are you a big cook?
I like to cook, but I don't cook a lot, which seems strange, right? Seems at odds with each other, but he's got me wanting to start cooking some of these dishes. Now, he focuses a lot on steak, but he cooks a lot of different things.
I think your wife's going to be a fan of him because you can make her dinner.
Yeah, my wife does not like to cook whatsoever, so we share it, and she probably does more than I do, but she would love it if I would cook every day. She would be the happiest person on earth.
My wife wouldn't. I can't cook unless I can boil it or microwave it. You don't want me cooking it.
All right, let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Catherine Rainoni and Tracy Thompson. So great new support. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. That support really helps the show out. And for anyone else that wants to help, head over to patreon.com/criminology to get started.
You know, we mentioned it a couple of episodes back, but wanted to remind everyone that we're already looking forward to the next Crime Con. This is everybody's favorite true crime convention, and people are already making their plans for it.
Yeah, CrimeCon's happening in Orlando, Florida at the Rosen Shingle Creek, September 24th through the 26th, 2027. And like Mike said, if you want to go, don't wait because tickets and rooms are going fast.
And if you are going, make sure you use our promo code Criminology when you book at crimecon.com, and that'll save you 10% on your standard badges. All right, we've got all of that out of the way. So let's jump into this week's case. It's a recent one, and it may be one of the most shocking and bizarre cases to happen in a long time. It felt like every headline that came out, added a new piece to the puzzle, but the headlines quickly faded away, which left us digging for all of the info we needed to tell the story. The killer died just moments after his victim and didn't leave any kind of ransom note or manifesto to explain his actions, which perplexed those who knew him. So loved ones are left to piece things together and try to heal with really no hope for justice. And long after the media moves on to the newest stories, the families connected to this case will be dealing with loss and pain. And like I said, this is a very wild case, but a lot of people may not have even heard of it because it happened right on the heels of Nancy Guthrie's kidnapping. And that case has clearly dominated the news cycle. And unfortunately, Morf, you do see this quite a bit, right? When you have a headline grabbing case, and Nancy Guthrie's kidnapping has certainly been that, pretty much all of the cases that happen in the wake of that or while everything is still going on, they don't get the attention that they might have gotten without that big headline grabbing case. And this is one of those.
Yeah, it seems like the media gravitates towards certain cases and really latches onto them and wants to bring all the updates they can. But during that, effort to get as many details out about that story, they often overlook other cases. And I think this is probably one of them.
Well, and Gibby and I just did this case about an 8-year-old who went missing on 9/11. And he actually went missing before the 9/11 attacks the year before. The problem is every year after that, his anniversary is on the anniversary of 9/11. So his missing case doesn't get the coverage. So it's kind of different, but very similar.
Yeah, especially on a case that big that people remember and think about every year, and it comes back in the headlines. That's one that seems like it will continually be, unfortunately set back behind some of the major headlines. On July 29, 2026, 60-year-old Shukur Aikebaer was enjoying a quiet evening with his wife and their 13-year-old daughter at their home in Chino Hills, California, in the Los Angeles area. Sadly, their lives changed in an instant that night. It started when the power went out. Now, a power outage during the summer in Southern California isn't a rare occurrence due to power grids being overwhelmed and people trying to stay cool. But Shukur must have looked out the window and noticed that his neighbors were unaffected by any power outage, because he decided to go outside of his home to check on the problem. Most people might have thought that they tripped a breaker and would check out their electrical panel to see if they could figure out what the problem was. But usually that's inside your house. We're not sure why, but Shukur decided to go check outside of his house. But a trip breaker wasn't Shukur's problem.
Investigators would learn that someone intentionally cut the power to his home in order to lure him outside in the dark. It certainly seems that way, since while he was outside, Shukur was attacked by 2 men. As we'll talk about a bit later, these men deliberately targeted Shukur. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. They didn't come across a helpless man with no power who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It seems he was clearly lured out. Surveillance footage from a nearby home would reveal the suspect's silver Nissan Altima pulling up to Shukur's home. At the time, the car pulled right into his driveway. The power was still on. So all of this makes it seem pretty clear that the power outage was the beginning of a very intentional incident. Once he was outside, Shukur was completely vulnerable to an ambush. And we're going to get into more of the details, Morf, but already this is a very scary situation. You and I have talked about it quite a bit. Your home kind of being your safe space, right? That's what we all think of it to be. But what happens if you are lured outside? Because I know for a fact I have been in similar situations, not intentionally lured out, but have gone outside of my home because something's not right. Either I hear a noise or there's a light that's not working and I'm trying to figure out, is it my breaker? Is there something on the outside? this just scares the you-know-what out of me. To think that somebody could intentionally do this and be waiting to ambush me the minute I walk outside.
Yeah, I think a lot of homeowners, are probably in that situation where something's not working, they hear something, they want to see what it is, they go outside, and they're not expecting to be attacked. And especially at night, you're more vulnerable because you can't see as well. So if there's anyone looking to do you harm, doing it in the dark is probably a little bit more dangerous for you because you can't really see to defend yourself. When Shukur confronted the men, one of them shot him during their struggle. Ultimately, they were able to get Shukur into the trunk of the car and speed off into the night, though they wouldn't make it very far. At around 10:15 p.m., a neighbor heard the whole commotion and called 911. The neighbor reported hearing what sounded like a gunshot, as well as screaming coming from a nearby home. They could hear a woman frantically asking for help because her husband had been shot. One neighbor saw a car hit a curb as it drove away from Shukur's home. Shukur's terrified 13-year-old daughter also called 911. Officers from the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department immediately responded to the 2100 block Monte Verde Drive. This was clearly, to say the least, a frantic and chaotic scene.
So no doubt, a very chaotic scene, right? It's later at night. But the one thing that really struck me, because we talk about the decision of people to either call 911 or not. And a lot of times people hear something, they're not sure, they think it's a gunshot, but later on they say, we weren't sure, so we didn't want to call. This neighbor definitely called very quickly, recognized what they thought was a gunshot, and didn't wait, called 911. They also heard what they thought was screaming, so maybe it was a little more clear to them than other instances. But, it's worth a discussion because we hear it time and time again where people think they hear something, but they just don't want to call. And I think a lot of times it's because they don't want to be wrong, right? They don't want to call the police to find out that they wasted their time and what they thought they heard wasn't really anything at all.
We've talked about a lot of cases where someone would hear screaming in the middle of the night, yet no one would call police, and then find out someone was murdered right next door. And it's very frustrating. But in this case, the person did the right thing. And that's the kind of neighbors I hope I have, that if they hear screaming and shooting going on in the middle of the night, they're going to pick up the phone, because I would do that for them. So, that I'm glad this neighbor took action.
Police were quickly in pursuit of Shukur's abductors, and they caught up to them pretty fast. The men with Shukur in the trunk were still in the area when officers arrived. The officers initiated a traffic stop on the Altima, attempting to pull the car over, but at first the driver didn't stop. After a short pursuit of just over a mile, the driver did comply, pulling over and stopping in a neighborhood. That was the end of the driver's cooperation, though. The passenger got out of the car and put his hands up, signaling to officers that he had given up. They knew they had him, but the driver remained in the car and acted somewhat erratically. The driver's door opened, then it closed. The car rolled forward a few feet before once again coming to a stop. The driver opened his door again. This time he got out with his hands up, but he quickly got right back in the car. The driver got out of the car again, this time walking directly to the trunk, and started to open it.
Suddenly, the man opened fire on the trunk, shooting into it multiple times. Officers quickly responded by shooting the driver. Despite immediate attempts at life-saving measures by officers, he was pronounced dead at the scene. When police opened the trunk, they found Shukur inside of it, and sadly, he didn't survive the gunshots he had suffered. Investigators were able to confirm that while he was injured before the traffic stop, it was the shots that the driver had fired into the trunk that killed Shukur.
And I think we got to break this down more. I mean, I know I've mentioned it before. I don't know if I've mentioned it on this podcast or not, but I watch a ton of police body cam videos. I'm addicted to it. I'll admit it. And this does seem, while not exactly the same, like a lot of the situations that you see officers have to deal with, right? They pull someone over and pretty quickly the person starts acting erratically. Now, sometimes it's inside the car. It could be because they're intoxicated, either drunk or, high on something. But this is like nothing I've ever even heard of. Now, the first part is, right, this person is acting erratically, pulling forward, stopping, getting out of the car, getting back in. But then all of a sudden to walk to the back of the car, to the trunk, and just to open fire into the trunk. You think about these police officers on this stop. I mean, this is like a split second type of thing. I'm assuming from the time that he starts firing, they have to make that decision very quickly.
Yeah, I'm like you. I watch a lot of those body cam footages too on YouTube, and no two traffic stops are exactly the same. There's always something slightly different. There's always different things that can happen in an instant, and the police on the scene have to act quickly. And in this case, for him to take out a gun and start shooting, and not at them, but shooting into the trunk, they definitely felt there was a threat, regardless of him shooting. Even though it wasn't in their direction, they felt they needed to neutralize the threat.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime someone pulls out a gun and starts firing, right, whether it's in the direction of the officers or not, I mean, they're going to have to respond with some type of lethal force. And obviously they did. And we mentioned how chaotic the scene had been at Shukur's home, but undoubtedly this scene where police had stopped the Nissan was also extremely chaotic. At the time of the traffic stop and the shooting, authorities had no idea that Shukur was in the trunk. They weren't even sure that a kidnapping had occurred. All they were told was that there had been gunshots and screaming. For all they knew, the car that they had pulled over had been involved in a drive-by shooting, or that maybe it was the getaway car used after a home invasion. Detectives had to figure out exactly what happened and who was involved. As it turned out, this crime was completely personal to the perpetrators.
The driver who was killed was 67-year-old Zhengfeng Bo, and the passenger was his brother, 66-year-old Zhengfeng Bo. Investigators executed a search warrant at the home that the two brothers shared in Irvine, about 30 miles away from Shukur's residence. It seems likely the reason that their pursuit came to a stop on Wandering Ridge Drive is that Zhengfeng panicked and accidentally took a left when he turned out of Shukur's neighborhood instead of a right. There was a quick 1.3-mile drive to the freeway, which would have taken them right home, and it was a straight shot from the neighborhood to the freeway. Authorities made it to the scene before the car had made it out of the neighborhood.
Authorities learned that Shukur and Zhengfeng were not strangers. They had reportedly known each other for 20 years after meeting in China and had what investigators called a prior working relationship. Both men were involved with Panchi Inc., a commercial real estate firm. Zhengfeng was the company's chief executive officer, and Shukur was the chief financial officer as well as the secretary. This was not the only business the two were involved in together. Zhengfeng was one of multiple investors in an apartment complex in Pasadena, California, about an hour and a half north of Irvine. There were $2 million tied up in this deal, more than $800,000 of which Zhengfeng personally put up. The developers, the Madison Collection LLC, have been sued multiple times over unpaid loans related to this Pasadena property, which was said to have been worth $20 million. So we talked about, the wild scene at Shukur's home, the wild scene at this traffic stop. And now we're trying to unravel how these people knew each other. What was the reasoning behind it all? We're starting to get some of the details, right? These guys worked together, and obviously there was a lot of money involved in some of these real estate deals. And we know, Morf, money is a big time motive for murder. We see it all the time.
Yeah, what I also find interesting is that this wasn't a crime that occurred at the hands of a stranger. As in most cases, the victim is connected to the person that attacks them. So that's, we see that often, that turns out to be the case. And, it was clear to police that there was more to this story and that there was some bad blood apparently between them.
So a lot of money, which definitely could be a motive, but we're going to have to figure out, what else is there? Is that it? Or is there more to the story?
Michael Chen, Zhengfeng's attorney, was shocked by the actions of his client, who he described to the LA Times as a very reasonable person. He couldn't believe that Zhengfeng would kidnap or kill anyone, and also found it hard to believe that he targeted Shukur. The attorney told the Times, "I had never seen this side of him. I was really surprised. He was aware that the men knew each other and were business partners, but denied their relationship seemed in any way adversarial, and went on to say, but obviously something happened."
Hey, I'm running out to drop off a stack of letters and packages. Need anything shipped while I'm gone?
Save the gas. Stamps.com lets you print postage and schedule pickups right from your desk. Sync your contacts into the address book, get detailed accounting insights, and get notified the moment your certified mail is delivered.
All from my desk?
All from your desk.
Join the 4 million businesses using Stamps.com right now with code PODCAST and get your free welcome gift. Stamps.com, code PODCAST. Taxes and fees apply.
Did you know using your browser in incognito mode doesn't actually protect your privacy? Take back your privacy with IPVanish VPN. Just one tap and all your data, passwords, communications, browsing history, and more will be instantly protected. IPVanish makes you virtually invisible online. Use IPVanish on all your devices, anytime you go online at home, and especially on public Wi-Fi. Get IPVanish now for 70% off a yearly plan with this exclusive offer at ipvanish.com/audio.
It's unclear why Zhengfeng would have taken his anger out on Shukur, since it was the Madison Collection LLC that was allegedly refusing to pay back their loan, and Shukur wasn't even involved in any of the lawsuits. His name wasn't even in any of the documents filed. Maybe Shukur told Zhengfeng this would be a sure thing, or talked him into it when he had a chance to back out. Zhengfeng had once called Shukur a middleman. San Bernardino County District Attorney Jason Anderson told ABC7, obviously there's been some type of dispute, perhaps either decision-making within the business or some kind of financial loss that led to a dispute.
Yeah, it's like the oldest time, people fighting over money, or romantic issues, romantic love triangles. They seem to boil down to a lot of common factors that cause these disputes.
Yeah, I would say, right? Money/greed and love, romance. To me, those two things kind of encapsulate a lot of motives for murder. They really do. Now, there's a lot of variations, right, within those two categories.
The relationship between Shukur and Zhengfeng goes so much deeper than a business or development deal. This dispute may have been what led Zhengfeng to be angry enough to kidnap Shukur and kill him right in front of the police. But the two were friends back in China before they ever moved to the United States. They had known each other for at least 2 decades, and Shukur had once worked for Zhengfeng. We know Zhengfeng moved in 2019 to the United States so that his children could attend school here. But it appears we don't know exactly when Shukur moved. But it seems as if he moved first from the general timeline coming together, from what friends and family have said publicly.
In China, Zhengfeng owned a construction company that built infrastructure like roads and bridges throughout the country. When he met Shukur, he was managing a public work site that was under development. Shukur was local to the area, and at the time was some type of bureaucrat. Zhengfeng ended up hiring Shukur to be his assistant and help him find good deals to invest in. This history, specifically with Shukur responsible for identifying lucrative opportunities for Zhengfeng, leads some people to wonder whether there was some pent-up resentment that Zhengfeng had been burying and keeping to himself for maybe a lot of years. It could be that this new investment, following through, maybe in his mind reclassified some of those old mistakes as part of a pattern that Zhengfeng felt was unacceptable.
Shukur was Uyghur, which may have added to his motive to relocate to the United States, where Zhengfeng was mostly motivated by better educational opportunities. According to an LA Times article, in China, Uyghurs are subjected to surveillance, forced labor, and detainment in concentration camps. Zhengfeng was Han, meaning he belonged to China's majority ethnic group. We can't say whether these differences between the two men had anything to do with what happened, but it's interesting. As we'll talk about in a bit, there was a specific person that Zhengfeng felt was causing issues regarding the apartment complex loans.
The Bo brothers' friend and neighbor Tony Liu recalled that the brothers were good friends with Shukur and the families were close. As recently as 2022, Shukur was barbecuing lamb for a large get-together at one of Zhengfeng's properties. Tony didn't see anything wrong or different between the two back then. Everyone seemed to have a great time together. It seemed as if the two men were friends and not just business associates or casual acquaintances. In fact, Shukur and Zhengfeng referred to each other as brothers. This is basically the main reason that everyone who knew the people involved have been so shocked by what happened. If there was a problem between them, they were close enough that they should have been able to talk about it and work things out.
Tony Liu confirmed that Zhengfeng was upset at Shukur over the investment into the apartment complex in Pasadena. He told NBC Los Angeles that Zhengfeng was upset that there was no net positive cash flow for him or his business, and Zhengfeng also suspected that Shukur was using him to make some money. Tony recalled that during one conversation in the past, Zhengfeng had claimed he was worth $20 million thanks to his assets, like cryptocurrency and businesses. According to Tony, there was someone else that Zhengfeng had specifically named as a source of financial troubles related to the Pasadena apartment complex. He blamed the project manager, Jason Chaiwan Wang. Zhengfeng hired Jason because he needed someone who could speak English and communicate with him since he didn't speak the language. And he also needed someone who was well-versed in regulations and building codes in the United States. Jason reportedly received a 30% stake in the project.
So at least to me, Morf, there does seem to be some conflicting information. Even in what Tony Liu is saying, it seems to be conflicting a little bit because, he's saying these guys seem like they were great friends. They should have been able to work stuff out. But then he's telling NBC that he knew Zhengfeng was upset with Shukur over this apartment complex deal. But then you have this guy, Jason, who's brought into the mix, seemingly being blamed by Zhengfeng as possibly the source of the financial trouble. So I don't know. There's a lot going on here, and it's hard to unwrap it all.
Yeah, I think there's no question, a case like this proves that when you introduce a financial aspect or money dealings between friends, it can cause friction, even if they have a good, long-standing relationship. And then you have this Jason guy getting involved, and there's a lot of money going around here. This, we're not talking about thousands of dollars. We're talking about, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, it seems like. So whatever was going on financially, it seems like Zhengfeng wasn't happy with the situation.
The apartment complex project in Pasadena began just before the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's a big deal, right? We all remember back about how the world basically came to a grinding halt. And this construction project that Zhengfeng had poured money into was no exception. He took out a loan for $12 million and put up $7.5 million in cash to get the ball rolling. The project was completed in late 2023. The plan was for Zhengfeng to use the income generated from rent to pay off all the loans so that he could start all over again with a new project. The problem was he owed so much that the rent he received didn't even make a dent. At nearly full occupancy, the rental income for the entire year, just over $1 million, was less than the total interest on the loan.
Zhengfeng, who had overseen many construction projects in the past, felt that Jason must have lied to him about the total cost of the project. He requested a financial audit of the project, but Jason apparently refused to comply with any of his requests for documents. By the way, Tony wasn't just a random neighbor. Zhengfeng confided in Tony so much that he actually asked him for help finding a good accountant that would do the audit. Tony even recalled Zhengfeng telling him that if after the audit was completed, it was proven that Jason had stolen from him, he hoped he would serve time in prison. This is an important point because he never threatened Jason or said anything about him wishing him harm, other than the appropriate time behind bars if it turned out that he was really a thief.
And I think one of the problems I'm having is that it seems as though Zhengfeng was really upset with this Jason guy and thought that maybe he had cheated him out of money or was behind, this big issue with money, even maybe more so than Shukur. But yet we obviously know that Shukur ended up being his target. So that part to me is a little confusing.
Man, it makes me wonder if it's possible that after he did whatever he was going to do with Shukur, that maybe Jason would have been next on his list. Maybe he would have kidnapped him and done who knows whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point. Along with the audit request, Zhengfeng also used his voting power, a 70% majority, to oust Jason as the building's manager. According to the LA Times, in March of 2026, Jason told Zhengfeng via email that he wanted to sell the complex. The email with a brokerage agreement attached read in part, "We need to make a decision to sell or not. I would attend the meeting if it's necessary and productive. Otherwise, let's not waste time."
Tony was aware that Zhengfeng had recently purchased 2 different guns, a shotgun and a handgun, but he was told that there was a coyote problem Zhengfeng was trying to get under control. All we do know for sure is that Zhengfeng was filing lawsuits against Jason Wang 2 days before the kidnapping. He filed this lawsuit and then 2 days later decided he had to kill Shukur. Why? How would killing Shukur really stick it to Jason?
But Morf, I do want to go back to the money, right? Because money seems to be, in large part, at the heart of this in some way. I mean, we mentioned the millions of dollars, right, that Zhengfeng had tied up in this apartment complex. And I get the theory, right? You build this apartment complex, you rent it out, and the rent that's being paid pays for the loans, right? Makes sense. People do it all the time, I'm sure. But this situation seems to have gone really badly. If it's fully rented out and the rental income is not even making a dent in the loan payments, like he's upside down every month. That is a terrible situation to be in.
So it seems like COVID really did a number on Zhengfeng and he was in the hole and things were just spiraling money-wise for him.
Yeah, I can see that, right? If you were in real estate, I mean, we all lost. I mean, everybody was hurting at that point in time. But I think if you were in real estate, maybe even more so. And you could see a guy like this with a lot of money invested, how that person could lose money. And then even when this apartment complex is finished, it didn't pan out the way that I think he thought it would, and maybe the way Jason told him it would. That's what I'm getting from this whole thing, that he held some resentment against Jason, but then that makes it that much more strange that he chooses to go after Shukur. Why not go after Jason? I mean, obviously, we're not saying go after anyone, but we're trying to make sense of the decisions he made. And right now, it's pretty tough.
Yeah, and unfortunately, since he died, we don't know what he was thinking. Maybe if he had lived, he might have told investigators what was going through his mind, but we just don't know.
Hopefully, Zhengfeng confided in his brother, Jan Quan, about his thoughts and his plans so that he might be able to shed some light on what happened here. Now, answers won't change anything that happened, but may help things come into focus. Knowing why Zhengfeng killed Shukur won't bring him back, or make his loss any less painful for his loved ones, Shukur's oldest daughter told NBC Los Angeles, "I want to know why, because it does not make sense. Nothing makes sense. It feels like a movie." Right now, they're left with the impression that anyone, no matter how well you know them or how long you've known them, could suddenly turn on you for no reason. Why wouldn't they be fearful of every relationship they had? Or at least resistant to letting anyone else in the future? There's no way to live your life. Shukur's daughter also said, "We don't feel safe anymore. Like anything can happen. We don't feel very protected." They may also be wondering what kind of things their loved one was doing that could have led to it ending like this for him. I think they would be relieved to find out that he wasn't up to anything, and he was the kind of upstanding man they always thought he was. And there's no doubt that this is a very tough place to be in, right? If you're Shukur's family, I mean, first of all, you're grieving for his loss, but at the same time, they have to be trying to figure and sort all of this out, right? Why was he targeted? Was he up to something that he shouldn't have been? And we have no indications of that, but would those questions pop into, the family's mind? I think they'd have to. And this whole idea of not feeling safe, not feeling protected, I get that. I mean, when this comes out of left field, how could you feel safe?
Yeah, we talked about how these two guys had a close relationship, 20 years. It spanned, 2 continents. They went to each other's house and had cookouts and things like that. So it wasn't just a financial relationship they had. They clearly had some kind of friendship. And for him to be pulling the trigger on Shukur, there's got to be a million questions racing through their minds of why did this happen? Did Zhengfeng suspect Shukur had embezzled some money or stolen from him in some way? And, it came to this. I think without having those answers, and we may never have these answers, the family's going to constantly be thinking of these things.
Well, and it's not just the family, right? I mean, there's a lot of people looking at this case trying to figure out the reason why.
The only explanation Tony Liu has as to why Zhengfeng may have taken Shukur's life is that he acted spontaneously and without thinking it through. Tony Liu told the LA Times he moved like lightning, striking almost as soon as the thought occurred to him. But it seems as if there was some premeditation in this, some level of planning. Zhengfeng drove all the way to Shukur's house, cut his power, and attacked him when Shukur came out of his house. Could there have been more victims? If Shukur didn't come out, would Zhengfeng have forced his way inside and also attack Shukur's family? We just don't know.
It seems as if the only person who may have additional answers is Zhengfeng's brother, Zhengfeng Bo, who, as we mentioned earlier, was unharmed during the shootout that killed his brother and Shukur. He has since entered a plea of not guilty to charges of kidnapping and murder. He's currently being held in custody with no bail. He could potentially face the death penalty due to the special circumstance of a murder during a kidnapping. This has to be specifically filed by the district attorney, and it was. As San Bernardino County Sheriff Shannon Dykes told ABC7.com, this was a calculated act of violence. Though Zhengfeng can be sentenced to death, there is currently a moratorium on executions in the state of California.
It will be interesting to see if this case goes to trial, since the murder was captured on police dash cameras and a nearby home surveillance system. The victim was in the trunk of the car Zhengfeng Bo was in. There's not a lot of wiggle room here to pretend that he had no idea what was going on or that he wasn't involved in any way. Yes, it was his brother Zhengfeng who pulled the trigger, not Zhengfeng, but that doesn't matter legally if he helped his brother during the kidnapping, which at this point it certainly appears that he did. San Bernardino County District Attorney Jason Anderson explained to ABC7.com that because of the kidnapping being inherently dangerous, Zhengfeng would have known exactly what the plan was when they went to the victim's home. That's the concept and the theory of felony murder.
And even if Jan Kwan has answers, it's not going to bring Shukur back. Shukur was married and had 3 daughters. Zhengfeng was well aware of this. We know how close they were. There's no way they didn't know about each other's kids, but it seems like he didn't care. And you got to feel for the family, in a lot of different ways, right? The loss of a husband, a father. But then, something that maybe we don't think about quite enough, they have to continue to live in this house, at least for some time. They don't have to live there forever. They could sell it. But this house where all of this happened, again, how do they feel safe? There has to be a lot of fear. And it's one of the few pieces of Shukur that they have left. Shukur's oldest daughter, Zalana, told the Mercury News that he was the greatest father ever. Beck Liu, a good friend of Zalana's, clearly had a lot of admiration for Shukur, saying, he showed me how to be a father, was a really nice person who treated me like his own son. Family friend Adam Nijada described Shukur to the New York Times as very modest, like the kindest guy you could ever meet in your lifetime. No one else so far has come forward to say a bad thing about Shukur. This again is part of what makes this crime so confusing and shocking. What the heck happened? Was this just the final straw for Zhengfeng? What was he really thinking? And I think the tough part, Morf, is that there is a chance we may never know. All that we know for sure is that a very well-liked family man is dead, and his family misses him. And as we wrap this one up, it is a baffling case in many respects. Baffling, shocking. I mean, there's a lot of different adjectives that you could use for it. But cases like this, and this one is still unfolding, right? We may learn more information as time goes on. But right now, people are trying to figure this one out. And there's just not a lot of information to work with in that respect.
Yeah, and if the Zhengfeng had lived and gone to trial, and maybe this would have all come out and people wouldn't have to guess or theorize what happened. But whatever was going through Zhengfeng's mind, it was clearly serious. There was something that caused him to take these drastic measures, and that led to this deadly outcome. And it's frustrating that we may never know what that final straw was.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that money was somehow at the heart of this. Right? You have this big apartment complex project. He seems to be in some sort of financial difficulty, right? We know he's upside down on this loan. He's not making enough from the apartment rents to pay back even the interest, I believe. So, he might be in financial straits in that respect. The problem that I'm struggling with, and I think most people are, is where the anger towards Shukur comes in. I think he was angry with Jason, maybe thinking, that he was embezzling or he got me into this or something along those lines. But where does the anger at Shukur really come in? It has to be something with money. This isn't a love triangle. This isn't, something along those lines. It's all around money.
And it makes me wonder, was there some kind of, in Zhengfeng's mind at least, some kind of conspiracy between Jason and Shukur? Were they working together to take his money? Who knows what he was thinking? And it makes me, again, wonder, could Jason have been next if Zhengfeng had gone through with this and lived and got away from the police? Might he have gone after Jason eventually too?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because there does seem to definitely have been anger on the part of Zhengfeng towards Jason. What's interesting to me is the thought that, he makes it a wrong turn out of the neighborhood. What happens if he turns towards the freeway instead? Does he get away with this crime? And then, like you said, does he go on to target Jason, kill Jason? There's a lot of what ifs, right?
Yeah, a lot of unanswered questions to this point, at least, and they may remain unanswered, unfortunately.
But they may not, right? His brother may come out with some information. You know, if he goes to trial, we'll have to wait and see on all of that. But that's it for our episode on the Chino Hills kidnapping. As always, if you love the show but haven't done so yet, take a minute, go out, leave us a review, a rating. Also, keep telling your friends. Word of mouth about the podcast really helps us out.
If you want to find us on social media, we're on every major platform. Just search for Criminology Podcast on your favorites. And for news, old episodes, and more about the show, head over to our website, criminologypodcast.com. And if you want to join a discussion group about the show and the cases we discuss, head over to Facebook and join the Criminology Podcast discussion and fans group.
So that's it for another episode of Criminology, but Morf and I will be back with all of you next Saturday night with a brand new episode. So until then, for Mike
and Morf,
we'll talk to you next week.
Take care, everyone.